everyone. Welcome back to Get Down to Business. Today, I've got a treat in store for you. We have Andy Reid joining us. Andy is Australia's #1 auctioneer. He's a dynamic speaker, a success coach, and an author. Andy has a passion for making success more accessible to everyone. And he's the author of Success Curious, How to Define and Achieve High Performance. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, gang. I hope everybody is well over there in the USA.
Absolutely. Andy, your experience as Australia's #1 auctioneer. You clearly understand the power of performance and persuasion. How have the skills you've honed in that field translated into your work as a success coach?
Look, I think one of the most critical things is actually owning who you are. So Australia is sort of seen as a bit of a home of auctioneering, particularly in the real estate space, because we don't just use it for foreclosures and things like that. We use it as a prominent method of sale down here. So there's a lot of theatre involved, and we do a lot of them out the front of properties and whatnot. And in terms of how it's translated to a success coach, I mean, in order to be able to understand where you want to go, you need to firstly understand who the heck you are. And what auctioneering did for me was open my eyes to who I actually was, which sounds a little bit dramatic, but it really was true. It just opened a door that I didn't realize I had. I was living a life that I thought was going really well and I was being pretty successful in and all that. But then having that ultimate pressure and that ultimate accountability of having the future of people's financial freedoms and whatnot in the palm of your hand, it opened a door to a different version of me that I didn't realize I had.
Amazing, Andy. That's deeply inspiring. Your book is titled Success Curious. What does it mean to be success curious, and why is that curiosity so important in achieving high performance?
Well, I'm a big fan of the concept of always being a student of yourself. I think it's really, really important that we understand that none of us are the finished article, and the freedom that can come with that means that it allows you to feel a little bit more comfortable in your own vulnerabilities. I have this saying that I believe that vulnerability is the key to true professionalism. And by being curious and leaning into those vulnerabilities, you give yourself an opportunity, maybe not to necessarily just work on your weaknesses. I think it's more than that. Understanding your vulnerabilities and being curious in those vulnerabilities allows you to find just as much out about yourself and why you are vulnerable in those situations. And then you can either learn to accept or reject or improve or accept as it is. But at the same time, I feel that success is always an ongoing journey. It's the ancient sort of derivatives of the word success. It actually translates as to progress. And the famous philosopher Alan Watts, bless him, who's not with us anymore, he always talks about it linguistically and says people always talk about wanting to get there. I mean, I don't know if you guys have said, "Oh yeah, we'll get there." There doesn't really exist if you look at it linguistically, because by the time you get there, it becomes here. And so that concept alone had me getting real curious about this whole notion of success, because for a lot of people, it's on a pedestal that other people are allowed to have, and they're not. And the truth is rather different.
Andy, that's amazing and fascinating. We know that many people have let's call it very different definitions of success. Mm-hmm. How do you guide individuals in defining what success means to them personally?
I think firstly, it's truly accepting the fact that success is a uniquely individual thing by its definition. One person's success can be another person's absolute failure or just a standard for some people. And I've spoken to so many people around the world about this whole notion of success, and I've asked them, what is the definition of a successful human? Countless times. And I've spoken to stereotypically high-performing individuals, whether it's business, whether it's sport, whatever, artists and whatnot. But I've also spoken to, one of the most inspirational conversations I had was with a young lady called Francesca in the UK, who is a cerebral palsy warrior. She's been wheelchair bound her entire life. And her definition of a successful human was to just turn up because you don't know who wants to see you. And I just, it almost had me in tears, that conversation, because it was so pure in her own definition of success. And that is what people need to understand, is that it's so easy to be really downtrodden by the perception of success via social media. I don't blame social media, by the way. It's how humans have utilized an inanimate object that is the issue. And everybody has this perceived notion of success, and it's on this pedestal, and they can't achieve the car and the whip and all this sort of stuff. But that is because they don't understand what success means to them. Now, it could mean fancy car, flashy clothes, all the rest of it, right? But if it is, then something in their DNA is going to allow them to go chase that. Whereas for a lot of people, their definition of success has got nothing to do with material goods. It's more about being happy, being content, being comfortable in your day-to-day life, right? And I think that's where people need to understand. If they can just truly understand and accept that it is purely theirs to write. I mean, how cool is that? That it's theirs to write.
Absolutely. Andy, we're going to have to cut the break in a minute, but I'm curious, what are some of the key mindset shifts or habits that you encourage people to adopt in their pursuit of high performance?
First things first, like I said, become a student of yourself and understand. Everybody talks about values ad nauseum, right? Values are a huge thing that loads and loads of people talk about. However, I've asked rooms of people if anybody can give me their values that define them as a human being, and hardly anybody can, if anyone. And so the very first thing that I would do is really dig into if you understand what your values are. And if you can put 3 to 5 words on a line and have other people be able to pick that as you out of a list of others. If you can do that, like usual suspect style, then you've got an understanding as to who you are, and it makes it easier to move forward from there.
Amazing. Well, I've certainly enjoyed our conversation. I've got a lot more in store with Andy Reid when we come back after a very quick break. You're listening to Get Down to Business. Don't touch that dial. Hey, welcome back to Get Down to Business. I'm continuing my conversation with Andy Reid, who is Australia's #1 auctioneer. He's a dynamic speaker, success coach, and author. And Andy, I'm just loving this conversation. It's absolutely incredible. You emphasize that making success accessible to everyday people is what it's all about. What are some common misconceptions about success that you help people overcome?
One of the biggest misconceptions is brought around by the way that society throws so much data and information at people that it makes them unable to hear their own identity. That is one of the biggest issues that I think society has right now, particularly with Gen Zs, because there is so much information getting pounded at them on a daily basis. No wonder they can't actually hear themselves think and feel. So one of the biggest misconceptions that I've found is that identity and that connection from identity to success is governed by the information that we take in. It's not. Information is a neutral thing until you give it meaning, right? Which is why it's so important to understand your values, because they're the filters through which you decide if information has value or not. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception, is that there's this chasm between the haves and the have-nots. But the thing is, the have-nots, which is the vast majority of human beings, or the ones that perceive to have not, have got so much more opportunity, so much closer to home. But they see this big, grand, hairy, autistic stuff that's going up on social and going, that ain't for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, in your coaching, do you find that people often sabotage their own success? And if so, what are some of the common ways that they do that?
Big time. I mean, I do it to myself. Like this Success Curious book hasn't been written from an ivory tower. There's so much self-deprecation in that book. Half of it is like, learn from my scars, not from my wins, right? And I do it to myself all the time. You know, imposter syndrome is a very, very common one, where people sabotage themselves by feeling that they don't have a place in order to say anything. And when I was writing the book, I had a huge attack of imposter syndrome, to be fair. And my publisher said, Andy, just believe this. Just please take this in the right way. There are millions of people that know what you know. And I went, oh, crap, that's not ideal. And she goes, no. What I mean is, Andy, there's millions of people that know what you know. But the reason why you got the book deal isn't because of what you know. It's because of who you are. And when she said that, I had a bit of a penny drop when I was like, crap, if I just learn to accept that lots of people say similar stuff and do similar things and all the rest of it, right? Then the liberation that made me feel with respect to that whole topic of imposter syndrome and imposing chains on myself because woe betide me say anything that someone else has already said. It just gave me a sense of calm and freedom to be able to do things in my own way.
Andy, lastly, what's the one thing that you want listeners to take away from our conversation today that will help them on their own journey to achieving their personal definition of success?
The biggest thing and the coolest thing for me is the fact that you have way more control over it than you realize you do. Okay, there's so many people that are down and I can hear them commentating on it as they're listening to this, that, well, it's all well and good for you to say, you've got this, you've got that, I haven't got this, I haven't got that, I haven't got the other. That's fine, that's okay. But at the same time, one thing that you have got is the ability to choose. You can choose to take a baby step, or you can choose to stay where you are. But a baby step is still progress. I'm a huge believer in the aggregation of incremental gains. If you improve by 1% on the regular, then the accumulative growth is going to make your life feel infinitely better. So just stop trying to worry about the top of the mountain. Just worry about taking that first step.
Andy Reid, I've enjoyed our conversation so much. That's all we have time for. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
You can find, I'm a pretty easy guy to find, andyreid.com.au. Obviously, being down here in Melbourne, Success Curious is available on Amazon now in the US and Canada, which is incredible. And you can find me on Instagram at Andy Reid Coaching.
Thank you so much, Andy Reid. That's a wrap for us this week on Get Down to Business to Success. We'll see you next week.